Thank you. That's very, very interesting. And you mentioned the Internet of Value. You mentioned this exchange, these transactions. We hear a lot about tokenization. We learn about the crypto ecosystem. How can blockchain and cryptocurrencies support the financialization of some economic activities via tokenization? And also, in a sense, what is tokenization? Do you have any
Yeah.
opinion?
So that's what happens. Once you tokenize, you can financialize. I mean, you could create new markets. So let's take an example. Let's imagine you were a little bit older and you had kids and you lived in a high rise somewhere in East London where everybody has kids, approximately the same age. And you decide that it's far too expensive given inflation is now 10.3%. You think, I'd rather pay in kind for my babysitting than I'd want to pay in real cash. So you gang up with everybody else in that high rise and you establish a distributed ledger that has a babysitting coin, and you collectively agree on what the rules are. And the rules are, if I babysit for you, then I get a coin. If you babysit for me, I give you one coin. And then we have to have the rules established. So if you have one kid and you babysit for somebody who have 5 kids, is that the same? So you have to all agree on what are the rules. And so the point is here that as long as you've established the rules, you have an actual currency. It's an asset that doesn't have any value outside that high rise, but you have basically tokenized this process of sharing. And now, so the point is here that you try and take aspects of the world that normally is not kept, not tracked and agreed upon in that particular precise way. And you could then put a value on, for example, as in TradeLens. So the TradeLens is a blockchain-based system that was instantiated by Maersk, the largest shipping company in the world, and helped by IBM. But this is now a consortium with others that engage in the management of this, in the governance of this. So the 25 or so certificates from container traffic management or information work around container traffic that are encased in this blockchain, this is a tokenization of documents that before did not exist other than on faxes, on emails, on little ticks in a box inside a database. But now there's something that can be financialized and made subject for secondary markets, for example, for trade finance and other things. That the bill of lading, for example, is a certificate that gives you the right to open and take the content of a certain container. Well, you could take that and make it subject to various kinds of secondary markets. So the point is here that there are many aspects of the world that, of course, aren't financialized, like they're not recorded and we're not tracking it and we're not putting a number on it. And so as soon as you track things and identify them as tokens, then you can start thinking about how they might be part of other processes.
Yes, yes, that's very, very interesting, and something that matters a lot to the British youth is well, artists, small content creators. Arguably, they do not really benefit from the current system, where maybe they can make financial gains when they sell on the primary markets, but they
Yeah.
typically don't benefit from sales on the secondary market,
No.
which is maybe in a sense quite a shame. So how can blockchain help? We discussed about NFTs in the second episode. We didn't have the best view on NFTs, but how can blockchain, NFTs, royalties help small artists, for instance?
Yeah, so the point is, I think the most important thing to note here is exactly that that NFTs is now a name for something where there's a Bored Ape and all of that stuff. And to me, this is interesting, but it's sort of only vaguely interesting. So it's the Web3 version of putting your pixel art on an old 1997 web page, like in a sense, although there's value associated with it. So the most interesting, I think, thing about NFTs is exactly, and I would say generally, the if you look at the kind of technologies that's going to shape the next 20 years, there are things that link the physical and the digital world, for example, such as digital twins. There are things that allow us to do automatic things like self-driving cars and flying drones and all of that. And blockchain will play a key role in exactly making sure that the links we have between the physical and the digital world, that we somehow know where the value is locked in. And so it's clear to me that while digital art is very, very interesting, and when you have a traditional business model, then there will be a gatekeeper that will decide what the rules are. And that gatekeeper can now, as in the art industry, just decide that you don't get anything once it's sold. And indeed, the example of many famous artists that died poor. The interesting thing is, of course, once you tokenize something, you can keep track of it and you can authenticate it. And the point is there, you can then have these secondary models that if you have a whole collection of art, you can financialize your collection of art in the same way as David Bowie did many years ago, where he basically sold the rights to any future income. And the point is there, the music business has been revolutionized by the platforms now sucking up all the value. So if you have to have, I think, 300,000 streams on Spotify to get $1,000. And so the value is not flowing to the artist. The value is flowing to Spotify as increased equity value. And the point is here that if you had a collective way of looking at this, then you could be your own agent and you could set incredibly high transfer rate that anybody buying your digital art, they would have to pay you 99.9% of the resale value, and you would never sell anything. So you would have the risk of having to work out what are people willing to suffer. And you could even have that renegotiable. You could do all sorts of things, but it's clear what it allows. It allows everybody to be more uncertain on how they will get money. But you can say 10% or 5%. So Patreon is the idea that we can all have a little Patreon following that gives us a little bit of money. What happens on Patreon is indeed that a few end up with a lot of money and many ends up with next to no money.
Absolutely. And also, I mean, on Patreon, you rely on the centralized authority that can decide to ban you
exactly
whenever they want. Whereas with blockchain, this can be quite different. Yeah, very, very interesting. And maybe on a slightly different note. So as an expert around digital innovation, it's almost like you could predict the future. Almost. So as of today, there are already two countries, Central African Republic and El Salvador, that have adopted Bitcoin as a legal tender. Do you think, first of all, why is it the case? And also, do you expect this to become more and more common, and maybe the case in the UK in the future?
So I don't think you can exclude countries adopting crypto assets as legal tender. But the point is there, you need to think about, so if you want to have a Bitcoin as legal tender, you just have two slight problems. One is that governments tend to like being in charge of money. They generally like, and if you look at the reaction when Facebook wanted to do
Libra,
Libra. The problem you have is that I think it's relatively naive to think that national states that are well functioning, that have a functioning sort of monetary and fiscal policy system, that they are going to really accept. So you should always look at any innovation and say, what problem is it solving that the existing system cannot solve? So in the birth of Bitcoin, it was really born because the libertarians who wanted to be able to put money in their mattress and it would be worth the same when they took it out of the mattress 25 years later, they hated the notion that the central banks could just print more money and issue more money. So that they had a holy alliance with the cypherpunks who wanted to be able to send money to each other without any trusted third party in between. Now, the point is there, if you look at when Bitcoin and Bitcoin Cash, they split up, it was because those who wanted Bitcoin Cash, in a sense, they wanted Bitcoin to have a bigger block size so you could have more transactions. So the trilemma in any crypto asset arrangement, it is now so heavily skewed to those who just want to sow Bitcoin into their mattress, and then it should hopefully be worth more when they take it out. And the point is, this is not really commensurable with having something that is able to just basically, I can give you a 10-pound note now, and you said, but that's it. So I think you can largely say when countries adopt Bitcoin, well, it's because they have run out of other options, or this is a good option for them. And so when adopting Bitcoin is a good option for you, unless you're doing it by for ideological reasons. And if there are ideological reasons to adopt Bitcoin, I don't see that in a lot of countries at all. I can see reasons for countries to adopt it because their system is not really working for them. And there might be for remittances, but the way I look at that, if you look at the future, then Bitcoin may indeed not be the best option. As a global system, I think we can have second and third generation. So I think Ethereum is second generation, but something like other layer 1 protocols, I would see their third generation. And I think those might be proved much better. But the fundamental question is that, of course, national states would want to regulate these. So, because I don't think, it doesn't matter how much I like crypto assets as an interesting innovation, I generally think countries should be in charge of their own currency. I think there should be central banks, and I think these central banks should have a voice because they should have everybody's well-being in mind, rather than the well-being of one private enterprise or consortium of private enterprises.
This links really well to our previous episode around CBDCs. So if you want to learn more about digital pound, then listen to the episode with the Bank of England. Carsten, that was extremely interesting. A very interesting discussion around Web3, around tokenization, around legal tenders. Thank you so much for your time, and what a great way to conclude this great podcast series. Thank you so much, Carsten. It was a real
Thank you,
pleasure.
Arno. It was a pleasure. All the best.